Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is McKay, and in today's video here on a Sunday, at least in the United States, it is Sunday afternoon, we're going to focus entirely on basically two charts. Three total, because we'll give you, of course, the Bitcoin projections and kind of the scenario A, scenario B of how I'm playing that. But the two main charts that we're going to focus on that are going to be our clues as to what Bitcoin will ultimately do is number one, the DXY. So we're just going to do a quick follow-up on the video I made last Sunday talking about the potential breakdown of the DXY, which, so far has begun to happen. So far, so good. We're going to discuss the main chart that I'll be watching tonight and going into tomorrow, which is the ES1 or the S&P 500 E-mini futures. And then, of course, we'll jump in onto the Bitcoin chart at the end of the video and talk a little bit about price projections, scenario A and scenario B for that as well. I'll also sneak in a little bit of the news catalyst, which will play a role over the coming week and weeks as to what ultimately price action will do. And if all of that does sound, interesting to you, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. All right, so the first place that we're going to start, of course, is the DXY, just kind of a follow-up to the video I made last Sunday. This is, again, the daily chart, which is what I focused on that video that I did make last Sunday. What we focused entirely on in that video was basically three trend lines. You got to zoom out a little bit to see all three, but you had this first trend line down here. My head's a little bit in the way, but if I just move it up a little bit, you should be able to see. And that was this trend line here, which acted as support on multiple occasions before the DXY at the beginning of this year started to go a little more parabolic. And then it used this trend line here for support. And then what we were focused on in that video, which we'll have to zoom in a little bit for you to see, was actually just this most recent green trend line here, where it had bounced on once, twice, three times, and it was interacting with that on the last Sunday at least. And I had mentioned at the start of that, the following day, which was last Monday, that what I was looking for was for it to lose that trend line and then over the course of the next week or two find its way down from there to this trend line. Well, we're not there yet. And I did mention, and I'm going to continue to mention, that you need to exercise patience when you're looking at daily charts, and especially here in a second when we look at the weekly chart, as I kind of give some ideas of what I'd be looking for and what I kind of expect to play out over the course of the next few months. And the biggest thing, again, is just patience, because these moves are not something that's going to happen overnight. And in fact, I made a video on Friday, which was just a couple days ago, mentioning that, giving some ideas of what price action could do over the weekend as far as Bitcoin was concerned. But in that video, I made it also very clear that I don't really trust price action on the weekend anyway. And ultimately, I don't know that I really expected anything to happen. So far, we're only a few hours away from the candle close for this Sunday. And then, the ES1 and some of these things opening back up like futures trading. And Bitcoin's pretty much sitting right where it was, which to me is no surprise. It's just kind of a consolidation. We did have some key levels to the upside and downside to watch out for, just in case something exciting did happen this weekend. And those areas I will speak about again in today's video because they are relevant. But first, when I'm looking at the DXY, I want to talk about bigger picture, just kind of what I'm looking for over the next probably 2 months, really, going into the end of the year. We're talking end of December, possibly even early January, mid-January type of projections. And really what I'm looking for is I'm taking some confluence on this pattern on the daily chart, right, which has just been this parabolic kind of rising channel where it's just been ping-ponging around, right, where it had, the first impulse wave was relatively small, bigger impulse wave, followed by bigger impulse wave, bigger impulse wave, and then what I believe is our short-term top. Short-term as far as, to me, something that could take a couple months to play out, but ultimately probably is just a little bit of a rock in the road or a pothole in the road as far as the DXY is concerned, because I do expect it to push higher at some point next year. I don't think that the upside for the DXY is out of the way just yet. But that being said, this is a bearish pattern and that has a 68% chance at some point of breaking to the downside. And I'm kind of expecting that to happen sooner than later. When I say sooner than later, I mean sometime between now and the end of the year, right? And what would that look like from some targets? What would I, be eyeing for as far as the next major bounce? Because you have to realize, if you're new to following, what the DXY exactly is, it's the strength of the US dollar, and it's measured against a basket of other, major currencies used in the world, things like the euro, the yen, the pound, right? And ultimately, on higher time frames like the daily, which I spoke about in my last video as well, is just you have to look at this kind of as the inverse, as far as if this is going up, stocks typically, the majority of them are going down, and the vice versa is true most of the time on these higher time frames, where if this is pulling back, it means that the dollar's strength is weakening some, and people are potentially moving their money out of the dollar and into other things, hopefully things like risk on assets such as Bitcoin. And so if we are to make a macro, suggestion that this could pull back more, what I would be looking for, at least using just regular simple TA, combining this chart kind of with the weekly chart, I like to do what I always call a conservative move. For me, that's going to be taking this last low inside of the rising channel and going with that, just because we don't have a confirmed new low yet. So to me, this is the most conservative. It's not, that's not the most conservative. Sorry, most conservative would be something back in here, but it's a fairly conservative target. A lot of people like to take the widest part, which we could also, potentially show you that as well. But in this video, I'm just going to focus kind of on what I prefer to use, which is my conservative targets. And so I'm going to use from here, and then I'm going to clone this. And we're just going to take that and kind of, try to guess somewhat where a breakdown of this green trend line would occur, which is the underside of this rising channel, right? And let's just say that it happens sometime in the next couple of weeks, maybe middle of November, something like that. What you would do is you would put this cloned, measured move on the underside of where this breakdown could happen. So say this rolls over in the next couple of weeks and ultimately breaks down, retests that, and then this ends up being our measured move. Is there some confluence with that? Well, that's always what I'm looking for when it comes to measured moves. Really, at the end of the day, is confluence. Is there a major area of support? Is there moving averages? Well, I have this green box there for a reason. And the main reason being, if you go back here, it was where the top was in March of 2020. You had the big top come up right there. And then, everything after that just kind of pulled back, right? That would have been the great C word. We won't really say that word. We try to avoid that word these days. But anyways, I look at that as being a major area that people would probably front run, for a major bounce. Is there any other confluence? Well, if we switch over to the weekly chart, this is where I see more confluence. And the confluence that I see here, if we go ahead and just get rid of my little scribbles on the chart, is these moving averages, this pink and this red. These are the 50, the pink being my 50 EMA and the red being the 50 SMA. And if you look, price action hasn't retested those in quite some time, basically ever since August of 2021. So about a year ago, a little over a year ago, it flipped those as support, and it's just kind of been off to the races ever since, right? So at some point over the next few months to the beginning of next year potentially, you would expect maybe a retest at some point of these moving averages. Would that be, overall in the bigger scheme or picture, bearish? No, it would just be potentially another higher low before it pushes back up over here throughout maybe 2023 to ultimately put in another higher high, right? That's kind of what I would be, my bigger outlook would be. But the nice thing is if we get some sort of a move like this could be super, super fruitful as it pertains to trading. You can get a few months even of some sustained upside out of, stocks and of course Bitcoin by association. So that's what we'd be focusing on. Now, quickly, just again, when I say the next couple of weeks, I don't mean that the overall move would play itself out in the next couple of weeks. This could be 3 to 4 months altogether before it came back down and tested these 50s, if it does or if it were to. But what I mean is in the next couple of weeks, you would see the signs of this potentially happening. Maybe the beginning of the breakdown of this trend line that's been holding the DXY up ever since the beginning of the year, right? Because the minute we lose that, a confirmed breakdown of that over the course of a few days, or in this case, a weekly candles closing, that's when I think we're off to the races for some actual good midterm holds. Things that I'll be talking about in the in the next several weeks. Things like Link, things like DOT, things like Atom, XRP. A lot of these blue chip coins that have been around a while. I shouldn't say they're all blue chip per se, but some of the ones I mentioned like Link and stuff especially are. You know, they've been kind of suppressed for a long time by the overall market and the DXY and the strength of the dollar, and these are things that could see significant upside in just a very short period of time, especially on a macro perspective. Because on a macro perspective, a few months time period, you know, is a very short period of time. And if you can get 40, 50, 70% gains out of some of these altcoins, you know, that's the kind of gains that can change your life. So these are things we'll be looking out for, but that's kind of my update on the DXY. And then just to leave the DXY off on this note, this is just a kind of a follow-up from Friday's video, just the scenario A, scenario B. I've been kind of drawn this potential falling channel that the DXY is forming. And scenario A would be, do we push to the top of this before we, you know, ultimately put in a lower high and then, you know, push back down to the downside? If so, scenario A here would represent a pullback on Bitcoin, which we'll talk about on the Bitcoin chart at the end of the video. Scenario B would be that it does get rejected, you know, over the next day or two, confirm rejections of this 50 moving averages, which is kind of the mid zone of this channel. And we roll over, you know, and potentially go ahead and retest this longer term trend line, you know, within the next few days or so. In which case, scenario B would be a bit of an upside move out of Bitcoin. So I just wanted to kind of show you that when we talk about each of these charts and we kind of piece these puzzles together, or put the pieces of the puzzle together, so to speak, this is kind of the first thing that I'm looking at. Now, as we move over to the ES1, the S&P 500 E-mini futures, to me, this one's a little bit clearer, so to speak, as far as what will likely happen, especially short term anyway. We're on the daily chart here for the ES1, and you can see here that this area that it's currently interacting with, which I have on my chart as kind of this little red zone, it has acted as, you know, support back here on a couple of occasions before a bounce. It was most recently resistance, resistance, flipped to support before this kind of big upside move, right? Then it came back down, used it as support again here, and then after it lost it, it used it as resistance here. So you can actually push this zone up even a little bit higher than I have it, something kind of up into this area. Go ahead and move that up for you. And that's really where we're at now. So the question is, and we should get the answer to this question relatively quick to start this week, probably as early as tomorrow, would just be, does it break through and flip this area as support? And then we see another push up here to probably these moving averages, the 200 EMA and SMA on the daily, this major red zone of resistance, and maybe even as high as this trend line up here that was resistance once, twice, you know, 3. And if we were to push that high again, you know, potentially could be a 4th time that acts as resistance. So really what we're looking for an upside move out of Bitcoin over the next few days to week and a half, 2 weeks, is all dependent on what it does now. You know, everything that's going to happen over the next day or two is going to basically set the tone of what Bitcoin's going to do over the next week, right? And it really just comes down as simple as that. Do we see a push up in the short term, you know, to these levels up here, which would see a move out of Bitcoin to the upside, or do we get rejected, ultimately maybe breaking down out of this rising channel, which in itself will have a measured move somewhere back down around here, you know, ultimately being another lower high. We have a high, lower high. You know, right now we're at a lower high, and until we get higher than this high, you know, that's all these are, is just little rallies that are ultimately leading to lower highs and, you know, push back down here. So scenario A here, which we should have the answer to in the next 24 hours, I would say, would be, are we going to break above and make another push higher somewhere up into this zone up here? You know, or are we going to break down and head back down somewhere back down around here? Now, in scenario B, I want to make it very clear that it would not spell, you know, doom to the idea that we could still have upside towards the end of this year or over the next month or two. It'd be more of a short-term thing, in my opinion. Ultimately, the beginning of a new trend could still be potentially forming ever since we've put in this little double bottom. Let me point that out on the chart for you really quick before we move on. And what I mean is, if you look down here, we had this bottom, and while we may have wicked below here, the candles all closed right here at the same area. So this is what's known as kind of like a W pattern, or a double bottom. This right here was the first. This price action right now is a higher high than this high here. So all the way down, you had a high, low, lower high, lower low, you know, lower high, same low, and then now a higher high. Just short term. We're not talking about macro, because clearly macro, you're looking at these highs back here, which are all still lower. But every trend reversal has to start somewhere, and it starts on lower time frames. You never know if those lower time frames are going to carry over to the bigger time frames, or if they're just going to be short-lived rallies. So time will tell, but getting a pullback on the S&P 500, somewhere back down to, let's even just say like this zone here, which has been support, kind of the 3740 to 3760 zone. In fact, we'll go ahead and just mark that on the chart in case we need to follow up with it in the next few days. This would represent another higher low. So that would be a higher low. So you'd have your low, high, higher low. And then at that point, maybe we'd get the push up. So these are things I'll have to follow up with as the week progresses. But I just want to be very upfront saying that my scenario B, which is a short-term pullback, which would be in confluence with the DXY, going up to this upper trend line. So again, scenario A here would be what I think would be this move down here for stocks, which when we get to the Bitcoin chart, we'll explain what that would look like for the Bitcoin chart. Scenario B would be the breakout push higher here, for stocks, which would be, in correlation with the DXY rolling over now and going here, right? So hopefully you guys are kind of seeing my mindset as I go through these charts and, before we actually hop over and explain what this would look like on the Bitcoin chart. Okie dokie then, and then to finish off today's video, we're just over here on the Bitcoin CME futures chart. This is the daily chart. When I first started this video, it wasn't open yet, but because I rambled on so long, it is now open, which is nice, so we can talk about it. So, Scenario A, Scenario B. Again, going from the DXY, Scenario A, I guess I took them off the chart, but Scenario A being the move up to here first before rollover. Scenario B being the bounce again. I know I've already spoke about this, 3 or 4 times in the video. Scenario A for, this would be the pullback here somewhere. Scenario B would be that it goes up here first, right? And then Bitcoin, same thing. Scenario A for it would be that if the DXY is going to push higher for the next few days or the rest of this coming week, you're likely going to see it lose this 20,000 area of support. And it's a very good opportunity to short the market, as if that loses that area of support, you could expect us to trickle back down to at least 19,500 and most likely something like 19K. And ultimately that could just be a low and a higher low. We've already put in this high, low, higher high. So again, if scenario were to play out, I wouldn't necessarily call for brand new lows coming in for Bitcoin or anything like that, or all gloom and doom. It may just be a pullback to something like 19K. God forbid we be back in this stupid range that we were in for all of summer. But that being said, it could still be a higher low, and then at that point we'd be looking for price action over the next few weeks after that to potentially push back up here somewhere, right? That would be scenario A. Let me clear the chart real quick out. Scenario B. Now get on scenario A if you're wanting to trade it. Look for a 4-hour candle body close below 20K, and then those targets of 19,500 and 19K are valid. On scenario B, which is an upside move in the short term, be looking for a break on a 4-hour candle body and above of the 21K level, flipped as support. And at that point, you could expect us to come back up here, in my opinion, to somewhere around 22,500. Just using simple TA for that target, because you can see it's an area that has been resistance and support on several occasions on CME. So it's just logical that that would be kind of the area. Now there would be some short-term resistance at around 21,850. The area right back in here, but ultimately I think it would just be a consolidation phase before we popped off to 22,500. So those are the key areas to look out for Bitcoin. And then I want to also finish the video off super quick by just giving you guys kind of an update on the news catalysts that are coming up over the next, this week and the coming weeks. Okay, so I went ahead and put on the screen the couple of major news catalysts that we have coming up. This is something I'm going to try to focus a little bit more on my channel going forward. These are things that I always pay attention to. I don't always mention them in videos, but I'm sure some people that follow these charts do like to know what's coming up, and as they have a huge trickle-down effect on ultimately what stocks do, especially these times that we're in right now. So this first one coming up, which is going to be major, is November 2nd, which is Wednesday, this Wednesday here in the United States anyways. It's the FOMC meeting where they're going to release what the new rate hike is going to be. The expectation, I believe, for the market is 75 basis points. That's what it's been the last couple. So if it's 75 basis points, I don't know whether that would be viewed negatively or positively per se. It'd probably just be kind of neutral. The biggest thing would be if they did more than that, that'd be very hawkish, as they say, and not good for stocks. The more exciting one for the bullish hoping would be if they did something like a 50 basis points rate hike, which would just mean that they're softening a bit, something that there's been rumors of going around. In that case, that'd be very dovish, and it may be the catalyst to lead to some of this more sustained upside going into the rest of this year that we've been kind of building a case for, right? November 4th, the unemployment rate released, and then November 10th, which is another big one, our next CPI or inflation data gets released. So keep an eye out for those, and we'll talk about those, of course, in my videos I make over the next day or two. And that looks like a good place to leave it off for today. If you're enjoying my content, as always, on your way out, please remember to like and subscribe. We'll catch you tomorrow. It's